like to call to order the meeting of the Regional School Committee, Dover-Sherborn Regional School Committee. Today is Tuesday, November 5th, and we are meeting in the Dover-Sherborn Middle School Library. The time is now 6:32 p.m. First on the agenda, we have community comments. Do we have anyone present here or online? Comment to share? No? All right. Well then, close community comments for now. And next on the agenda, Student Council Representative Report. But I don't know if you have any.
No, Esther sent an email this afternoon saying she regrets that she will not be able to be here. She has a conflict.
Okay. Moving on. All right. Well then, item 4 on the agenda is superintendent comments.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Happy Election Day. It's Tuesday, November 5th. I have a few updates, and then Mr. Conklin and Ms. Vittori will add to the conversation later on in their reports. So just general updates about what's going on. So we have launched our Shadow a Student experience. To date, we have 87 middle and high school students who have volunteered to be shadowed. And now it's kind of my weekend project to go through and match the students with their shadows based on profiles of students and grade levels that the adults want to spend the day with. To date, we've had 11 of our either instructional leaders, which are our curriculum team leaders or department chairs or administrators, shadow middle school students, and 13 shadow high school students, including Denny and myself. And we're getting feedback. Just to give you a couple quotes, it says, let's see, from a middle school curriculum leader: "Thank you for the opportunity to shadow a student. I'm even more intrigued now to see what a student life is like at the elementary school and high school," because she shadowed a middle schooler. So she sent some additional notes that I'll gather. And then another quote: "Being new to the district, I found this the best way to get in and meet teachers and students where they are, literally. This was the really powerful the most powerful experience I've had since being in the classroom in 2017. So lots of great feedback. So once we get through the instructional leaders and leadership team, we're going to open it up to all teachers and start matching them with students. And Dr. Reineman and Ms. Collingsrud are really helping at the elementary level, matching students with adults. So far, so good. I know I learned a lot. I believe Denny had a great experience. We're both exhausted at the end of the day, and then had to remind ourselves that if we were true students, we'd be going home to doing hours of homework and hours of activities and then getting up and doing it again. So that's probably why you go to school when you're young, because when you get older, it's a little harder. The Superintendent Advisory Council, which is also part of our Student Voice piece, is launching tomorrow afternoon. So we have 26 middle and high school students representing grades 6 through 12. That'll be meeting with Denny and myself on some of our early release afternoons. Our first meeting is tomorrow, and we'll have lunch together and then start talking about what student voice is and why it's important, opportunities they think already exist that they can name in the Dover-Sherborn system, and then how we think we can get additional student voice and input. And then hopefully we can identify some projects that we can work on and move forward doing those projects throughout the year. So stay tuned for that, but I'm super excited about that. Data analysis. Jenny is going to talk a little bit about our MCAS data and what we have gleaned from looking at that information, as well as AP scores and SATs, and how that can influence not only our work with the curriculum, but our work with students. So circle back to that. We are in the year 2024, in fiscal year 25, and we are now planning for fiscal year 26. So I know when Dawn comes up, she'll be asking you for your guidance and suggestions in terms of what you'd like to see happen with the budget. But we've already started meeting with our Chickering staff and our Pine Hill staff, looking at the needs of each building, and we'll soon be meeting with Mr. Smith and Ms. Deborah Keegan about the middle and high school. So we are already planning for next September. I can't believe that already. So Dawn will fill you in as we circle around. Parent organization outreach. So I had an opportunity to meet with the Positive board and provide some updates, many of the same updates you hear through these meetings, and answer some questions. And I'll be reaching out to the Pine Hill CSA and the PTOs at Chickering and the high school as well. And then Denny and I are working with the Guidance Advisory Council to look at challenge success data and really digging into that. So they have a meeting with, I think, Ms. Jagman and Ms. Rowley this week. They're going to get some homework, and then they'll come back and share their homework answers with Denny and me in January, and get ready for our presentation to all of you at the end of the month. And last but not least, student activities, which is the most fun. We've had a lot of things happening here at the region. So we had our 6th grade Halloween dance. So some of our kiddos there. And we had our high school students helping to organize some of the activities and the food and the fun. And that was the 8th grade. So we had the 6th grade Halloween dance, and then we had the 7th and 8th grade glow dance. And then here's our homecoming for our high school students, all dressed up. It was the homecoming, the Ho-Co or the Ho-Glow party, as they said. We had the jazz brunch, which was fantastic, and we had middle and high school a cappella. We had jazz bands. We had smaller groups, larger groups. And, of course, this past weekend, we had Macbeth take the stage. So congratulations to the casting crew of Macbeth for another great performance. And soon enough, we'll be gearing up for Annie, the musical, to take the stage in early December.
Nice.
So lots of great things happening in DS. And then in terms of sports, we finished our official fall sports season. We've had senior nights for all of our teams. We had TVL, Tri-Valley League champions for boys soccer and golf. And this past weekend, the MIAA playoffs started, and we have boys and girls soccer entering the playoffs, and we have varsity field hockey in the playoffs already as part of the Sweet 16. So our teams are continuing to play beyond the season and enjoying that. So congratulations to our athletes, and stay tuned. We'll see where they land. And that's it for me. I'm happy to take any questions or feedback.
Thank you. Any questions or feedback?
I just want to say that I was able to attend the 6th grade dance as a chaperone, and I was able to witness how much fun they had without phones, and we kept marveling, the parents and Miss Sacco and I were just marveling at how much fun they were having.
Mm-hmm.
They really were fully engaged. They did not miss out on anything by not having their phones. So just want to say good job. I really applaud that policy for school events, and I think it will really benefit us all going forward.
That's great.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's great to have the first probably social between the Dover and Sherborn kids, really coming from different elementary schools. It's nice to have opportunities like that where they have structured time together. I also thought I wanted to thank you again for working through the logistics of allowing staff to shadow students. I think that's just a great idea, and to experience that day to day to get a sense in what the kids' experience is like. And I see that could impact, along with the Superintendent Advisory Council, some concepts, ideas for next year. And who knows, maybe budget related, but it's great to hear. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to pass the baton to Denny, if that's okay. For
Sure.
more analysis of data.
Great.
All right. So I am
You go.
here today to give you an update on our 2024 MCAS results. So let me give you the standard prelude here. So this is a quote by education researcher and guru John Hattie about data and testing. And he says the major purpose of assessment in schools should be to provide interpretive information to teachers and school leaders about their impact on students, so that these educators have the best information about what steps to take with instruction and how they need to change and adopt. And there's a number of different analogies you can make to when we're looking at standardized test scores or looking at data. Most recently, I was with some colleagues, and they were talking about data being kind of a flashlight. It helps you see kind of little pieces of it, but it's not going to illuminate everything. So I think that's a good way to frame how we're looking at the MCAS scores in this kind of one data set that we have. I think another way to frame it is looking at this data pyramid. And you can see that at the very top are the standardized tests that happen annually, things like MCAS or AP scores, SATs, or access assessments for L students. Then we have things that happen 2 to 3 times a year. So we have diagnostics. At the elementary level, we have IXL. At the middle school level, we have IXL. We have our Panorama SEL surveys, our midterms and our finals at high school. Then we have things that happen quarterly or at the end of units. Those are like end of unit tests or quizzes or essays, projects that happen 1 to 4 times a month. There you have formative common assessments. That might be a common assessment, a common writing prompt that students have, some student work products. And then on a daily and weekly basis, our teachers are all the time dipsticking students and seeing where they're at through exit tickets, through using technology and getting students to respond on a Pear Deck or on Google Classroom answering a question. And you can see with the kind of proportion of the pyramid, those are the things that happen all the time, and they make up the biggest section there. And then as you get to the top, the MCAS results, while important, are just kind of one piece of this whole data pyramid that we look at. So with that being said, I'm going to start off just by giving you a little bit of an idea of the overall Massachusetts state landscape. So overall, as a state, in terms of ELA, and this is through K through 3 through 12, ELA results show lower achievement in all grades from 2023, and we still haven't gotten to the pre-COVID levels overall in the state in ELA. A little bit of better news statewide for math. Math results showed improved achievement in 3rd grade, and then in the other grades, progress is relatively flat and kind of stagnant. So you have a little bit of a dip in ELA, and then in math, things are staying pretty flat. Better news for science. Our science statewide results show an increased achievement in grades 5 and 10 with a lower achievement in grade 8. Another thing that the acting commissioner really stressed was the impact that chronic absenteeism continues to have on student achievement. So when we use the term chronic absenteeism, we're thinking about students who are absent for 20 days or more, which again makes sense. If you're out of the classroom for that long, it's probably going to have an impact on your achievement. So these are the statewide trends and what's happening across Massachusetts, and we'll see in a moment how Dover-Sherborn compares to the statewide trends. Another reminder is that the data is going to show us two things. One is going to be achievement. So those are the student scores. So with the student scores, when we look year to year, that's how this year's 3rd grade class did in comparison to last year's 3rd grade class, so cohort. When we're looking at this thing called SGP, that's student growth percentile, that kind of stays with the students and is a measure of how students have grown year to year, that same group of students. So again, the achievement, we're going to look at how did this 3rd grade do versus last year's 3rd grade? How did this year's 10th graders do compared to the 10th graders that took it last year? And then when we look at SGPs, that's looking at the same students and seeing how they have grown compared to how they last tested. And that's even more important kind of at the middle school since we have a 3-year range, 6, 7, 8 of the scores to look at. So we'll start with the middle school. So we divided this up into the 3 content areas. So we'll start with our 6 through 8 ELA data. So the good news here is that we are always outperforming the state. So you can see, for example, that 20% of our students in grades 6 through 8 exceeded the standards on the ELA MCAS versus 9% for the state. You can see 50% met expectations versus 30%. So we're clearly exceeding the state. We saw more students this year who exceeded versus last year in 2023, and then we saw a little bit of a dip in the meeting. When we're looking at these overall trends at the bottom, we can see that about 69% of our students were meeting or exceeding. That was down 4% from the previous year. When we look at the scaled scores, again, dropped a little bit at 510, and then our average SGPs, you can see that also went down a little bit. So I'll talk in a minute about the things that we've kind of gleaned and pulled out from these statistics. But ELA is certainly an area where we see that we can have some more growth, and that we saw a little bit of kind of a shift downward in some of those areas. When we think about math, you can see again that Dover-Sherborn is far out performing the state. I mean, we had 35% of our students exceed versus 8% of the state. So our students are doing really well compared to the state average. In terms of our percentages of students meeting and exceeding, 71% of students met or exceeded, which is up from the previous year. It's 33% above the state average. Our scaled score, our average score, stayed the same. Again, still almost 20 points higher than the state average. But the number that's also good to see is our SGPs went up in math. So students are gaining grounds kind of relative to where they were the year before. That went up about 7.4 points. And you can see the state average is 3 points. So not only are students achieving well here, but we're seeing them get growth from year to year. And then science is only administered in grade 8. Again, you can see that our students did very well here. 80% of our students either met or exceeded. You can see that that's 41% higher than the state average. Our scores went up 11% from the previous year. And if you recall the statewide trends, 8th grade is the only place where statewide they saw a dip. So the fact that we went up is really great. And then the average scaled score went up as well for this year. So with all of this data, what are some of the big takeaways that we have? In terms of successes, since 2019, if you look back pre-COVID, we're making progress in closing the achievement gap for our low-income students. So that's good to see that our low-income students versus our non-low-income students, we're closing that gap in their performance. And actually in 8th grade science, our low-income students outperformed their non-low-income students in 8th grade. So when we think about last year, I presented to you our Student Opportunity Act plan. That was one of the disparities that we noticed. So to know that we're making progress in that, I think, is really encouraging. Another highlight was in 6th grade ELA. So I mentioned that overall, if you look at 6th, 7th, and 8th together, we had some little dips here, but 6th grade ELA was a standout there. Students who exceeded expectations grew from 5% in 2023 to 24% in 2024. We also saw a 13% increase in students' essay scores and a 14% increase in the writing scores. So we were very happy with the scores that we saw in 6th grade. Again, you can see that in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we had some nice gains in math and our SGPs. And our 8th grade science students had the highest level of proficiency since 2019. So you hear a lot of discussion about, like, are we getting to the pre-COVID levels again in 8th grade science? We are. We're right back to where students were performing before COVID. Some areas of focus. So our subgroup data indicates that our students with disabilities and our Black and African American students continue to need additional support, and that we continue to see those gaps between those groups and their peers. When, again, I mentioned kind of the dip that we saw in ELA, our overall analysis of the item analysis in ELA is suggesting that students need more support in writing specifically, both in producing writing in the essay portion and in analyzing writing, which is when they're looking at writing and thinking about grammar, looking at sentence structure and whatnot. So that's a thing that we really want to focus on. And another piece that we saw when we went through the item analysis and literacy is that we need to make sure that we are using and focusing on informational text, nonfiction works with our students, because some of them had some trouble connecting concepts to what they were reading in those nonfiction texts. So that's a place that we want to reinforce the fact that reading happens everywhere, not just in ELA. That's happening in social studies. I think the new curriculum that we're piloting this year really lends itself to a skill-based focus. But we've also been having good conversations in science. In science, they do the CERs, their claim evidence reasoning. So we've been talking about how we can infuse those literacy skills throughout science. And I had conversations with the science curriculum leader, ELA curriculum leader, and the social studies curriculum leader. And basically, they got all of their writing stuff out, compared it, and they're trying to make it so that we can have like one common graphic organizer for all three of those areas, so students see the through line in their writing. Because the CER isn't very different from, in social studies where you're writing in DBQ and you're coming up with a thesis statement and then you're supporting it. The same with English, when students are coming up with their claim and they're giving their evidence for that. So the more that we can show our students the way it's all connected, I think the better we will be. And what's also really heartening is the fact that a lot of the things that we saw some needs for improvement in, we're already doing. So a lot of connections to our district improvement efforts. The first thing is just having data team meetings and utilizing this portal called Open Architects to organize all of our data. So the first time this year, our admin, our teachers, and our support staff all have really clear access to the MCAS results and can see them, can look at the item analysis. In the past, they would have to log into the DESE website, and it was a pain. So this is making it a lot more streamlined for teachers. We have an MTSS dashboard now, so you can type in a student's name and you can see all of their information all at once. So you're going to see how they're doing in their IXL, you can see their MCAS scores, you can see their item analysis, you can see their absences, you can see their social emotional learning surveys through Panorama. So in one kind of place now, we can pull up a student and get a huge, larger picture of our students. So if we're seeing students who are struggling in the MCAS, for example, we can double check that with the SEL surveys and say like, oh, this student is also saying that they don't feel like they belong. So maybe there's SEL work that has to get done alongside the academic work. I think at the middle school specifically, we have a lot of structures put in place starting this year to better support our students. So the biggest thing obviously has been the WIN block, the What I Need block that has been new this year at the middle school, where we're able to give targeted interventions for students in ELA, math, and executive functioning. We're also giving opportunities for students who aren't in interventions to practice all of those skills and to figure out the areas that they need to continue to get practice in. This year, we are continuing to expand our co-taught classes to give students more of the support they need. And we also have a full-time general ed reading specialist and math specialist. So we have additional support embedded throughout the day for our educators. A continued focus for us is going to be continuing to strengthen Tier 1 instruction and how do we differentiate instruction. A good example of this is on December 2nd, that full PD day. Our ELA and our social studies departments are going to be meeting together to talk about from 6th to 7th to 8th grade how they can structure reading, writing, speaking so that they're reinforcing the same skills in each of the content areas, but they're also building on each other from year to year. So thinking about the horizontal and the vertical alignment. So I think continuing to focus on the Tier 1 instruction, the instruction that everybody gets, and making that as strong as possible will be important. Now we shift to the high school. So when we look at the high school, ELA grade 10, again, it's the same story. We continue to do and outperform the state. You can see in ELA that we had 87% of our students who are meeting or exceeding. That's 45% higher than the state. It's no different from the previous year in terms of the percentage of students meeting and exceeding. But given the statewide landscape where almost everybody is showing a downward trend in ELA, the fact that we stayed steady is actually a very encouraging sign there. Combined with the fact that our scaled score went up from last year, our average scaled score, and we're seeing good SGPs for our students, I think is a good sign for our grade 10 ELA students. When we look at math, our math number is very impressive. So 89% of our students were meeting or exceeding. Again, that was the same from the last year, but 47% higher than the state average. I think it's really impressive that we have 0% of our students who are not meeting in math. And our average scaled score went up and our average SGP went up. Our average SGP went up almost 9 points. So our SGP start on the higher end anyways. So the fact that it is continuing to go up by that much is even better for us.
And sorry, just to point out, yes, we had the same number of students meeting or exceeding, but in this year, 2024, we had so many more exceeding than last year. So we have the same in the top two tiers, but they're more in the top tier.
Yep.
Right.
Then biology, MCAS, again, our students at the high school continue to do very, very well. 88% of our students who are meeting and exceeding. We had 0% of students not meeting. And that went up 2% from the previous year, 44% higher than the state average. And our scaled scores went up as well. There's no SGP for biology because there's nothing to compare it to from previous years. So our big takeaways in terms of the high school and our successes, we had modest gains in all content areas, especially in the average score in SGP, which again, in the context of the state landscape is a good thing. Our math department is very proud. Students who are exceeding expectations in math grew from 24% to 43%. Exceeding expectations, so that was an increase of 19% of our students exceeding expectations. This is the highest percent that has exceeded expectations within the past 5 years. So again, when we're thinking about like that pre-COVID information, our students are doing better than they have even before COVID started in terms of that exceeding category. Overall, our racial subgroups are doing better than the state averages. You can see the breakdown here. So for example, in ELA, for our Black and Hispanic students, 81% of our students were proficient versus 57% at the state level. And you can see the comparisons in both math and biology. So again, that's encouraging to see as well. Mm-hmm. Areas to focus on, this is very similar to middle school. So our high need students, so the category of high needs encompasses three groups: students who are either low income, students who are English learners, or students with disabilities. So that's that big bucket of high needs. They continue to do better than the state average, but within Dover-Sherborn High School, our various subgroups still have a gap between them and their peers who aren't in those subgroups. So even though we're doing better than the state averages, we still want to make sure that a student with disability, or students with disabilities, are beginning to kind of close the gap more with students that don't have disabilities. Same with low income. A more in-depth look. So this is the benefit of being a small school district, is that the high school department heads and Mr. Smith and Mr. Amara have now looked at every single student individually who either didn't meet the expectations or only partially met, and have looked at the levels of support, like the schedules of each of those students. They looked at whether or not these students have an adult in the school that they feel like they can go to. So that very in-depth look has made us look at some students who might benefit from some more targeted services, specifically at the high school co-teaching, which is continuing to grow this year, and our small group classes. And we're going to continue to look for ways to support our Hispanic and Latino students and our African American and our Black students. Our connection to our district improvement efforts, the same as I mentioned with the middle school, with having discussions about this data. Each of the three departments, so ELA, Math, and Science, tomorrow there's an early release, and they'll all be looking into the item analysis to really go to a very specific level of the standards that our students might have struggled in. And I say struggle, it's not really struggle, since just places where our students we think could be doing better. And they're going to be thinking about ways that they can adjust their curriculum for this school year to kind of meet or to give a little extra push on some of those specific standards. At the high school, we continue to have good support for our students in our co-taught classes, our small group classes, and as I mentioned, we want to make sure that students have an adult that they've connected with in the building. We also just want to continue to look at the correspondence between students that have low attendance and MCAS scores. And I just gave you some comparisons with the state. So again, in terms of our average attendance rate, we're higher than the state rate. Average number of absences, we're lower than the state. And when we think about having 10 or more absences, we're lower as well. So a big push from the state has been addressing chronic absenteeism, but again, it is less of a problem in Dover-Sherborn than it is in the overall state. Finally, some other data points that we have in terms of that big data pyramid, our AP scores, which are encouraging. So last year we had 246 students take AP exams. We administered 602 exams. So that's the highest number of exams we've ever administered. And you can see that 96.3% of students got a score of 3 or higher, which is considered passing when we're thinking about our AP scores. I think this first statistic is fantastic, that 72.3% of all DSHS graduating seniors took an AP course or an AP exam at some point during their high school experience. So that's showing that we are providing access and opportunities for students to leave Dover-Sherborn having experienced that AP level course. 84% of our students scored a 4 or higher, and then 49% of our students scored a 5 or higher. And then when we think about all the exam areas, our scores went up from the previous year in 10 out of 15 content areas. In terms of our SAT and our ACT scores, again, you can see that the total score there, 1308, went up, and it's the highest that it's been in the past 5 years. And then you can see the breakdown for the English reading and writing, the math, and then our students who met the benchmarks for each of those categories. So even with the SATs, we're continuing to see our students making gains from year to year. And then we have less students that take the ACTs, but this just gives you a little summary of the composites or the specific breakdown of the ACT scores. So perfect ACT score is a 36. So again, our students are doing very well on the various ACT scores as well. Finally, come up for breath. I'm happy to answer any questions or any comments that you have about the bevy of data I just threw at you.
Yes.
I had a quick question. So now that you're saying that the teachers will have more, visibility of each student, so then I'm thinking ahead that the school might have some plans as to what to do with the MCAS data, right? And putting it to more use for each student. Is that?
And again, the fact that you can now go into this platform and pull up a student's name, it's not just going to show how they did in like the ELA MCAS. You can expand it and it'll show you by each standard how students did. So the fact that we made that more accessible, so a classroom teacher could see that, a special ed teacher could see that. So it's hopefully giving more information to more people to make better decisions about kids.
Is that through Open Architect you're talking about? Yeah.
Yep.
So do staff have access to that right now and training or background or time?
Yes, and I can see who's logging in all the time.
Okay,
how many logins
Excellent.
they've had. So
All right.
it is being well used, and I've put together a bunch of screencastifies to kind of walk people through how to access it, which is good.
Great. Thank you.
It's his little things that excite Mr. Conklin. He often runs into my office being like, you'll never guess what they're doing in Open Architects. They're starting to log interventions. I'm like, oh, goodness.
So
That excites me too, actually. Screencastifies on Open Architect, I'm all for it. So, yes, thank you.
Quick question. So the sixth grade stuff, those individuals that took it in fifth grade that are current sixth graders.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Dover-Sherborn has done a very good job in identifying the weaknesses in the ELA program, and I want to encourage to keep a continued focus on it because these children that are matriculating now from sixth grade didn't have universal screening for dyslexia or learning disabilities. These are the children that had 1 year of COVID at home, and so those students who are tier 1 support or have ELA weaknesses are really behind. And so I was encouraged by the phonomic and curriculum updates that are happening in elementary school, but I throw up a pebble in a pond, that ripple effect continues all the way to the edge of the pond. And so these children are going to start coming through. So I just want to continue to realize their past history of almost no schooling because of no faults of their own because of COVID. And then the maybe they were starting from a little bit behind because they weren't identified because universal screening for dyslexia didn't occur. So I just want to keep the focus on those children so they don't get missed as they continue through the Dover-Sherborn
Thank you.
district.
Definitely through the WIN block at the middle school and interventions, we're being able to give students more of what they need. And I don't think I've mentioned this at a regional meeting because it's more at the elementary level, but we are beginning a review of our elementary ELA curriculum. So people should be, the community should be getting a survey at some point in the winter. We're just going to be asking for feedback on components of an elementary literacy curriculum that people think are really important and that they value. And then we'll use that to help us evaluate our current curriculum and then make a decision about whether our current curriculum is meeting our needs or whether we need to go and look at a different curriculum. So that's coming kind of January-ish.
So I was going to ask, because you can see where they still haven't caught, up as much in the math and some of the others. Do you think that's because of the COVID year? Because it builds every year, so then there was that one big pause. And so with each year, we should exponentially catch up because we've plugged in that, hopefully, and maybe we found where the deficiency was from that year.
Yep.
Theoretically, yes.
Theoretically.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
And every year the test is different with different
True.
questions.
Yeah.
Right. And every year the state can decide where they set the markers
Right.
for meeting, exceeding. And so it's a little bit of a game. But yes, we're hopefully catching up, like you said, to those pre-COVID numbers in all three subjects over
Yeah,
time.
and I wonder if they took that into account with some of their numbers when they say meeting, exceeding, et cetera, because well, it's just a total outlier.
And it's also, I will say this year is very frustrating that the only items they're releasing is grade 10. So normally they release sample test questions, even at the elementary level. We can see writing samples, and they're not releasing any of them this year.
Why not? Just
I have some ideas, but
Yeah.
they are switching vendors for
Oh.
administering the test, which I think could be connected
yeah.
to that.
And the tests are shifting. Can you talk a little bit about how they're going from standard tests that kind of we're used to to different kinds of questions?
Yes. So what I haven't given you, because it just came in, is they did the field test last year on the 8th grade civics, which, yes, our 8th graders are now taking 4 MCAS exams.
Wow.
This will be the first year that civics in 8th grade runs as a normal MCAS test, not a field test. So the civics test is much more inquiry-based. It's giving students a performance task. It is, there's a little bit of multiple choice, like let's see if we know our facts about the government. But a lot of it is skill-based, which I think is a really good step forward in terms of what the MCAS can measure. I can't believe this because I used to be a history teacher. The one I'm really excited about is the 8th grade science one.
Oh, wow.
Because the 8th grade science one is getting kind of a refresh. And I've done some of the practice tests, and it's really interactive now where they have computer simulations. So you watch this computer simulation of something, and then you answer questions about it.
Oh.
And the simulation will do something different based on how you've answered the question.
Oh, so it's adaptive?
So it just feels like very relevant and like actual real world scenarios that students would see and interact with. So I think like you can have whatever feelings you want to have about the MCAS, but I think that this is, at least if we're going to have it, pushing it in a much more applicable, real world, skills based, problem solving way.
It's fascinating.
Definitely. Yes. I had a quick comment. I think, Denny, when you had referenced, the benefits of a small school that Mr. Smith and Mr. O'Mara can meet with, or can actually look at the schedule and think about the full range of experience for some of the students who are struggling. Have they also met with some of the students? I think it could be really helpful to just ask, so what's happening? What's your experience like when you're in there taking that test? How is it, because we can have guesses as far as what might be happening, but for the kid to share some of their thinking around that. They could care very much about school and have just a really hard time in the test. And we want to understand how to connect that or give them strategies in a way that just supports them beyond like passing the test. And aside from that, I appreciate really the rundown. It looks like you're really looking very thoroughly and clearly expressing, some of the findings and tying it into the work that's happening within the school, both this year and some ideas moving forward. So it sounds like the optimal way to use MCAS feedback and data in terms of strengthening individuals and the district. So thank you.
I have one last observation as such from a few parents that I have talked to. We have a few of our parents, 4 or 5 of the kids are called a split, in a test, and they show a split in the grades and the test. Either they are doing exceedingly well in the school, are not good test takers, or they are doing absolutely phenomenal in tests, whereas they're just getting about 2.8 or about 3 in GPAs as of now. So do you think there is any way to find out what's going on with these kids? How do we use these data to kind of figure out?
That's a great question. One of the other dorky open architects thing that's about to happen is we're about to launch a new dashboard called Student Explorer, and that's where we will be able to see the test information along with the SEL information, along with things like GPAs. We'll be able to see common assessments. So if like the entire 9th grade history department gives the same DBQ, they could enter that score in. So again, you'll be able to see if the data is corroborating itself and giving a full picture, or if there are places, like you mentioned, where we're seeing that disparity. So they're building that dashboard now, and I'm very excited about it.
That's awesome.
Don't know who I am.
Really cool.
Data. That's exciting.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anything else? Next on the agenda, we have financial reports. So, Ms. Vittori.
Somebody else who likes numbers.
Yes.
I always feel like a downer. So your first report are the warrants that we have issued since your last met, and I will just highlight the one that's $999,945 is our payment for the rooftop units. So if you remember me saying they came in early, they sent me an application for payment number 1 that was $1.3 million, and I'm like, oops, I don't have $1.3 million because we didn't anticipate them being delivered so early, and we timed the payments from the town's IMA to be closer to when we thought. So they were willing to negotiate with me. I was able to because, we donated we contributed some money to that project, so I could piece together almost $1 million.
Nice.
So I was hoping I cut a check for $1 million, but the way the numbers worked, it came out to be 55 cents short of $1 million. I'm like, I'd love to see what a check looks like.
Yeah.
So I wanted to highlight that one because it's an unusual number, but it was a
Very large.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Insane if I had $1 million.
Exactly, right? It's been better if it had been $1 million. And I continue to thank Colleen for reviewing the warrant and signing on your behalf. And again, if you ever want to see more of the detail behind these, they're in our office.
Thank you.
Moving on to your monthly reports. So we are now looking at numbers as of October 31st. Not really a lot of changes since your September 30th. For the newer members, I keep the same report. And then what I do is I incorporate new information but bold it. But it's nice to have the running report so they don't lose something that we said in the previous. So there's very little bold until you get down to expenditures. And there I'm just noting that in this statement, you have preliminary projections for both healthcare and our utilities. So you'll see a little bit more of the unencumbered go away when we pull those numbers in. It's still early in the year, but healthcare is looking like we are on budget. I will say that the Medicare supplemental rates for our retirees were approved, and if you've been watching the news, I think everyone knows that we're seeing, because of regulation that the federal government did to try to control costs more on the pharmacy, even though it's like protecting the individual, somewhere the cost has to be made up, and so it's coming through on the premiums. So that piece of the premium did see quite a large increase. I think our MedX retirees are seeing a 9.5% increase. But remember, we're looking at a 9.5% increase on about $400, and then they pay half of that. And I will say for our Blue Cross subscribers, MedX, they had seen 0% increase for about 4 or 5 years. So we just make sure they understand that they had some really good years, and now it's time to catch up. But it's impacting everyone, the pharmaceutical world right now. So we'll see how that lands. So that was a little bit higher. That goes into effect January 1st, a little bit higher than what we had estimated for the second 6 months. But we should still be okay. And incorporated into your encumbrance as well is our planned $250,000 for our OPEB contribution. So it's our cost of the retirees' premiums as well as the $250 now have been encumbered. So hopefully that $250 will be able to stay. One other savings that I wanted to, as we start talking about next year's budget, highlight is, if you remember last year, we were looking at upgrading the World Language Lab and also bringing in new software. Well, as they continued post-March to look at their options, a smarter option was to go with the software that you didn't need a whole computer lab setup. They're able to execute it on student devices in the classroom. So it also gave us a freed up classroom that we now can use for other classes and help the world language. So we did not have to replace the desktops in there, and the software itself, we were going to have a one-time cost of about $26,000. The cost that we're the program we are getting right now is $8,000. So there is about a $40,000 savings in this year, and then those will be reductions in your fiscal year 26 budget because those were one-time expenses anyway. But I wanted to highlight that because I had missed highlighting that in the first report. So I think that's significant enough. But again, I think that is where I give credit to all the individuals here who continuously look for the smartest way to do things. We always talk about spending smarter, and that makes a lot of sense because if we were looking at space, well, having a lab there, a language lab that was only used certain times and having that whole space dedicated to that doesn't make a lot of sense. So over the summer, we actually disassembled the whole room, and now it's a regular classroom used by the World Language Department every period of the day.
Great.
So that so far has worked out well, and I think I've heard good reviews about the new program that they're using.
So have I at the open house.
See?
Yes.
Well, that's great. Like to try to tie it all in together.
Yes.
And then just finishing up fiscal year 24, as best as we live in so many years at once, our end of the year report was filed. Mark actually did the certification statement tonight, so the end of the year report's in this big book. And then we will have our compliance audit sometime before March 31st. We're still looking to schedule our field work with our auditors. We've been looking at the January-February timeframe, and we'll keep you updated when that all comes together. And as I previously told you, our E&D had already been certified. I had mentioned the last meeting, too, in the narrative about savings, about a position in the business office, our assistant business administrator. So that job was formally posted 2 weeks ago. I wanted to just highlight by name Leanne Wilkie because she had worked at the district for 12 years. She was here 2 years before I came and was like my buddy when I first started. And so she had partially retired, so we were keeping her long, and then she made the decision that she wanted to fully retire. So as of October 31st, we'll say she's sort of fully retired. I'm having her work from home a little bit because we have to do our end of the year reports for the other two districts, and so she's doing that for me. But she is officially out of our office as of October 31st, and I'm starting interviews this week for her replacement, and I'm hoping that we'll find someone within next month to fill that position. But I wanted to just publicly thank Leanne for her 12 years of service with us.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions? So Dawn, do we keep you on to look at the FY26
Yeah,
budget
so
guidance?
this is an opportunity before we present version 1.0 to you to get some feedback from the committee if there's anything that's sort of under your purview that you'd like to make sure we incorporate into the budget. It should be a fairly straightforward budget. The only unknown for us is that our transportation contract will be going out in January, so there will be a reserve for our increase in our gen ed transportation. Keep in mind not to shock the new members, but typically what happens is we see a large increase that first year and then smaller increases, but that's an opportunity for the transportation companies that have been servicing us to sort of bring their pricing back up because we're now on the 5th year of a contract. So this one went out to bid 5 years ago, actually 6 years ago. So it's sort of their catch-up year. And so I think historically you see a big increase year one of the contract, and for the next 4 years, at least the next 2 and 3, you're seeing very small and almost zero. They give you huge incentives to sign the 4th and 5th year on those contracts. So that's sort of how that's going to play out. So you will see a reserve for that. We will definitely have a finalized contract to bring forward to you probably right before your March meetings. Each committee may end up approving that at their March meeting before the final budget's approved. Fortunately, we have 1 more year on all of our association and union contracts, so it's easy to budget that because the numbers are there. And we're continuing to see increases in healthcare, so there'll be a placeholder for that. In utilities, I will say, are just, even though we have fixed rates on our supply, the delivery, I don't know if you look at your own home bills,
Right.
but the delivery, which we have no control over, just is now outpacing supply. So I'm continuing to see increases in our and our utilities. So those are sort of the big things that we'll be looking at. But at this point in time, we haven't had our meetings yet with the building administrators to see if they have any new initiatives. But as always, we're looking to present the most cost-efficient, prudent budget that we can, knowing that the towns are sort of on fixed increases. So we do strive to meet their guidance of, trying to keep the costs as level as we can.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Is there any more money left over from, speaking of COVID, when they said there was HVAC upgrades available for schools and things like that? Is there any more grants from the government for that, or is that all
So
gone?
those all those grants actually close as of 9/30.
Okay.
I will be, when we talk about capital in December, I'll be telling you a little. So I was able to take some of the ESSER money that we had left and apply it to the rooftop unit project that we had.
Okay.
Because we had plans to use the ESSER money for another project that wasn't going to get off the ground. So I did a little swap of funds.
Yeah.
So we did go through an approval process to get some of that last amount of ESSER money towards HVAC.
And then I'm new to the committee.
Yeah,
obviously.
no, ask
But
those
and then
questions.
because you've addressed the rooftop, so most people residential, when the roof has been finished, then they inquire about solar and things like that for offsetting. So if we're going to address utilities, I don't know, was there ever inquiry about the use of solar?
We have
panels?
looked at putting solar on these roofs here, and they're not good candidates. Mainly
yeah.
because if you ever look, we have a lot of equipment up there. I can show you the aerial view of the 7 rooftops that are on the high school. There's not a section that would be that to be a good candidate for solar. And we've actually looked at putting solar on all of our school rooftops, and again, we're just not in the best. If we ever do solar here, it's going to be the parking lot canopies.
Sure.
And so at some point we may look at that. That ties into if we ever are able, when the electric school buses get up and running, we're going to need to have charging stations here, and you can sort of do that swap. So that'd be something that we would incorporate probably when we look to go down that route.
Gotcha.
But solar is a huge topic with both our towns, and has been, that's a very, I get that question all the time, and we have done our due diligence on looking to see if our rooftops are eligible or are good candidates, and they're just not.
Great. Good thing was looked into.
Yeah, no, thank you to ask.
Thank you.
Ask as many questions as you need.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah, catch up.
exactly. Anything else? Or? Nope. Thanks. We don't have action items.
That's
So
okay.
next we have 2 consent items. And so I'll read each one to see if there are any questions or amendments. If in favor, the committee can approve all of the items with a single vote. So the first consent item is approval of the regional school committee minutes from October 8th, 2024. They're in the packet. And actually, I don't know if we want to discuss, we'll have time to discuss maybe the high school close-up field trip if there's questions, but the second consent item would be approval of the high school close-up field trip, where there's a letter in the packet as well.
And that's an annual thing that is very successful.
Yes.
So.
Sorry. I was trying to find the page number of Mr. Bork's letter.
9.
Actually.
It's 9.
Page 9? Okay,
Yeah.
so you can see that letter on page 9 if you'd like to see. I can say I'm excited. My daughter's going on that trip this spring, so it seems like a great opportunity. And these seniors missed out on the grade 8 DC field trip during COVID, so it's nice that some of them in the AP government class will have a chance.
That's great.
So, yeah.
Great.
And they must be at their election night.
They are. They're there tonight too.
Collected all the fees,
Yes.
so I
Yes.
knew that was
Making it
happening.
real. I think it's a great course and
Yeah, that's a great course.
nice opportunities.
For the rest of you, they take Mr. Bork takes his AP government kids into Boston, and they get their own kind of
Watch Mary.
banquet room, and they have the TV monitors going, and they kind of watch things unfold. Yeah.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah, juniors are pretty bummed about that they can't go.
I know.
No.
They have to wait their turn.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they were on an
4
off year
more.
for an election.
Yeah.
So may I have a motion to approve the 2 consent agenda items?
Motion approved. Kevin.
All right, Kevin Karate, thank you. May I have a second?
Colleen Burt, so moved.
Colleen Burt, thank you. Any further discussion? Nope. All in favor? It's unanimously passed. Thank you. The motion carries. So let's see, informational items. In your packets, you can also see the Dover School Committee meetings minutes from September 24th, Sherborn School Committee minutes from September 24th, as well as quarterly reports from the Tech Collaborative and Accept Collaborative. We can just call the next meeting, right? That was just information.
Next, yeah.
Alrighty, the next meeting is on Tuesday, December 3rd, 2024. We'll be looking a bit into next year's budget. If anyone wishes to add anything to the agenda, you can contact me anytime or bring it up now. I can take note. Alrighty.
And we will deliver your budget books to your house the Friday before. Just don't be worried. See strangers in your.
I always look forward to that. Comes on the front porch. It's really nice. All right. Thanks. So our meeting has come to an end, and it is now 7:28. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Thanks, Kevin, again. Thank you. May I have a second? All right, Tilla. Thank you. All in favor? Perfect. We're ready to go. Good night.